In this video, I will tell you about the peer-reviewed science behind using antiparasitics to treat cancer. I will show you the testimonials of how people's battle with cancer changed after these antiparasitic agents were introduced. And lastly, I will talk about why this isn't a mainstream medical practice. But first, a YouTube disclaimer. This video is not medical advice, it is just scientific papers and personal stories about how people beat their cancers by unconventional means.
So I had this ginormous tumor on my colon, but I got diagnosed with stage 4 colorectal cancer.
Stage 4?
Yeah, it had already gotten into my lymph nodes. Bam, I'm meeting with doctor after doctor. I meet with my medical oncologist and my radiation oncologist, my surgical oncologist.
Yeah.
So I go right into surgery, and they remove 15 centimeters of disease.
Wow.
And then they took the better part of my colon out. They took out my rectum too.
So how long is that struggle into chemo and the this?
3
and you're
years.
like 3 years?
3 years nonstop chemotherapy. They switched it. Fulfill. I reached my lifetime max of chemotherapy. They couldn't give me. My organs started shutting down. Everything started going bad, and they tell me, listen, if it hasn't worked by now, it's not going to work, and we can't give you any more. So just, you gotta go home and, live your life, man. And I'm like, well, what kind of life am I going to live?
Right.
And for how long?
Right.
So I'm driving south on 75 in tears.
Wow.
And I'm so weak, I can't even steer my truck, man. Let's call in my other sister. Now, my other sister is the spiritual beacon, right? So I call her, and she says, hey, Kevin, there's this guy, one of my neighbors in church, her neighbor had the same kind of cancer as you, and he got diagnosed at the same time as you.
Huh.
And he opted out of chemo. And I said, okay, well,
right. Well,
where do I send those flowers?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Because I just went through 3 years of hell.
Right.
Right. So where do I send those flowers? Because certainly if he didn't do what I did,
yes,
he's a goner for sure.
100%. Right.
She said, no. His wife is a veterinarian, and he did one round, and he said, screw this, I'm done. And his wife, she puts him on this Fenbendazole, this dog dewormer, or a cattle dewormer, or horse dewormer, depending on what applicator you get. And she says, Kevin, he's cancer-free. She's an absolute crazy person, right? She just told me to go take horse dewormer. And because
reminds me of a different story.
Well, somebody in the cult that she belongs to. This is what I'm thinking about.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
She's not in a church; she's in a cult, and everybody's taking dog dewormer and horse medicine and this and that. She gives me the guy's phone number, and I just called him right then. Hey, you don't know me, man. My name's Kevin, but I just got sent home to die, and I just really would love to talk to you about what you did to avoid that. And he said, I'm on a roof right now. I can't hear. Can I give you a call back? I can't even steer my truck.
Right.
I'm so weak.
Right.
This guy's swinging a hammer on a roof, laying cement, concrete, whatever.
Right. Right. He's going to be dead, right?
Yeah. And he gave me enough resources to kind of do some homework.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, if you don't believe me, there's a network of people out there, and it's not so crazy. And September 2nd, 2021. I started taking it that day. I'm starting to eat. I'm starting to gain some weight. I'm starting to actually hold some weight. Now, keeping in mind, 6 weeks in,
yeah,
I wasn't supposed to make it.
You weren't supposed to be there.
Yeah.
Hospice.
6 weeks in, I had already had a scheduled scan.
And what does that scan say?
50% less disease.
Wow.
14 weeks later, 14 weeks from September 2nd.
Yes.
Right? I have another scan. no evidence of disease.
Wow. I want everyone to know what exactly
Okay,
you
so
were
it's,
taking.
it's a breakdown of 5 different things.
Yeah.
Just so you know, the 5 ingredients,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Fenbendazole, annatto, which is it's only the good parts of vitamin E. Tagamet, it's really the active ingredient in Tagamet, which is cimetidine. Curcumin, which is an anti-inflammatory.
Yep.
And so that's not crazy. People
No.
take that.
No.
And AHCC is active hexose correlated compound. It's
Okay.
a collection of mushrooms,
Okay.
right? And that's supposed to maximize your immune system. So I took that for my immune system.
Kevin Henning's supplement stack and the science behind it will be discussed later in this video, but he is far from the only one with a similar story.
So I'm Dan Bolton. I'm a chemist by training, so I hold a PhD in organic chemistry that I got in St. Louis.
You were diagnosed with throat cancer quasi recently?
2019. So it was a squamous cell carcinoma, base of the tongue. And base of the tongue is not the tip of your tongue. It's the tongue way back here where it connects. And that was the squamous cells, so skin cells. And it was caused by HPV, which is the human papillomavirus. If I turned my head, it was probably about the size of a small egg. So it wasn't that long after I got my PET scan that I started my first dose of cisplatin and started the radiation. That was by far the most excruciating thing I have ever gone through in my life. But during that whole time at the beginning, we went out and found these alternative methods and started evaluating what they did, how they worked, because really trying to understand which ones could be real and which ones are probably more snake oil. We started the high-dose vitamin C and the Fenbendazole first. We started this about halfway through, and people say, well, how do you know it worked? Whenever we started taking the vitamin C, the Fenbendazole, and the Artemisinin, my tumor dissolved. So now I'm cancer-free. So we're going on 2 years, praise Jesus.
Unbelievable.
For the skeptics out there, I hear you say, well, these are just random people on obscure podcasts. If it actually worked, it would make national news. And for that reason, the next 2 stories are from The Economist and ABC News.
Melanie Kennedy, mother of 2 young boys, was diagnosed with breast cancer in 2013. It soon spread to her liver. She was given 5 years to live. Through a private health clinic, Melanie began a course of treatment using repurposed drugs, while continuing conventional chemotherapy with the NHS. The clinic recommended she take an antibiotic called doxycycline, metformin, usually used to treat type 2 diabetes, a statin or cholesterol-lowering drug, and Mebendazole, a worming agent. All these drugs were designed for other purposes, but may have anti-cancer properties. After a 2-year course of chemotherapy, along with repurposed drugs, her scans are showing no new evidence of disease.
When I got the news that my liver was cleared, I didn't believe him. I made him turn the computer monitor around and I read it for myself.
2 years ago, Joe Tippens says he was told to go home, call hospice, and say his goodbyes. The doctors were unanimous. He was going to die of small cell lung cancer.
My neck, my liver, my pancreas, my bladder, in my bones, it was everywhere. Once that kind of cancer goes that far afield, the odds of survival are less than 1% and the median life expectancy is 3 months.
Today, Tippens is very much alive, and what he credits for his survival has doctors scratching their heads and the rest of us raising eyebrows. In his desperation, he turned from people medicine to dog medicine, specifically Fenbendazole, or what you give a dog when it has worms. But was it the Dog Dewormer, or was it something else? Tippens took the dog medicine with daily vitamin E supplements and CBD oil. He was also taking an experimental cancer-fighting drug. But Tippens says out of the 1,100 patients on that clinical trial, he was the only one cleared of cancer. Tippens says he was saved by the Dog Dewormer, and he plans to take it for the rest of his life.
But I do have now 7 years of experience of watching success cases come in. And we're now well over 5,000 successes that we know about, other than me. And they cover virtually every subtype of cancer.
The Joe Tippens protocol will be discussed later in this video. But if all these people's stories are true, is there any published scientific papers about antiparasitics having anti-cancer properties? Well, yes, there are, Actually, there's a lot of studies. For instance, this study from the University of Oklahoma Health Sciences, where they implanted ovarian cancer tumors in mice. They let the tumors grow and then gave the mice Mebendazole, which is in many countries an over-the-counter antiparasitic medicine used to kill springworms. They observed a dose-dependent decrease in the growth rate of the tumors when the mice were given Mebendazole. They attributed these effects to the antiparasitic's ability to destabilize the small tubes that help the cancer cells maintain their shape, which is the same mechanism in which it kills parasites. But are these studies just published in obscure journals with low impact? No, not at all. Take for instance this study published in Nature, where they studied the anti-cancer properties of pyrovin, a drug used to safely and effectively treat pinworms. They showed a clear decrease in the growth rate of tumors in mice given this antiparasitic. They attributed the effect to pyrovin's ability to turn off the cancer cell's defense mechanism, called autophagy, making them vulnerable to starvation. But do all antiparasitics have anti-cancer properties? In this review paper, where they summarize the anti-tumor effect of multiple different antiparasitics such as ivermectins, milbemycins, benzimidazoles, artemisinin and quinoline, they argue that there are many similarities between cancer tumors and parasitic infections, thus there is not a far stretch to assume that compounds that are effective against parasites can also be effective against cancers, which they make a strong case for in this review. They also give a great overview of the mechanisms that different antiparasitics use to attack the cancer cells. Okay, but these are all studies on mice or cancer cells in petri dishes. Are there any clinical trials on real humans with real cancer? In this randomized clinical trial of 40 patients with metastatic colorectal cancer, they gave 20 people the monoclonal antibody bevacizumab and the chemotherapy cocktail called FOLFOX4 for 12 months. The other 20 people, they gave the exact same thing, but also 500 milligrams of mebendazole twice per day for only the first 12 weeks. After 12 weeks, they found a significant increase in how the mebendazole group responded to their treatment, and the only statistical significant side effects were stomach pains and diarrhea. Unfortunately, due to the design of this study, they stopped the mebendazole treatment after these 12 weeks, and after 12 months there was no difference in the CT scan results between the two groups. But still, even though the mebendazole was only used for 12 weeks, the progression-free survival was still better in the mebendazole group. So yes, there are a lot of studies out there supporting the observation of people using antiparasitics to get their cancers into remission, and I'm only scratching the surface with the articles that I showed you here. However, the people trying to beat cancer with off-the-shelf drugs doesn't only use antiparasitics. They typically use a plethora of vitamins, supplements, diet and lifestyle changes to maximize the anti-cancer environment in their bodies. The following are some examples of protocols that people have used with success. And this is not medical advice, it is just that we're curious on this channel to see what other people do. This is the cocktail that Joe Tippens used against his widely metastasized small cell lung cancer, and he's still alive 7 years after he got told he only had 3 months left to live. Back in 2017, he used 222 milligrams of fenbendazole every day, 3 days per week, and took 4 days off. He also took CBD oil and terracurmin. He was also on the cancer immunotherapy called Keytruda. But today, after everything he learned, he would have been taking 220 milligrams of fenbendazole every day without any off days. He also updated the protocol to use more bioavailable products, and the latest iteration of his protocol is openly available on his website, mycancerstory.rocks. Since many people have tried it with success, there's also been reports that not everyone gets better on the Joe Tippens protocol. One critique that could be made is that he only uses 220 milligrams of fenbendazole per day, and from this mice study that I showed you earlier, it was clear that the response for mebendazole in ovarian cancer cells was dose dependent, meaning that a higher dose would have more effect. Some people use higher doses, and one such example is Kevin Hennings, who beat his colon cancer with the following: 1,000 milligrams of Fenbendazole 3 times per day, which is a total of 3,000 milligrams per day, for 25 days straight, and then he took 5 days off and then repeated until he couldn't find any tumors anymore. He also took Tagamet/cimetidine 600 milligrams twice per day. He also took AHCC 1,500 milligrams twice per day, curcumin 400 milligrams 3 times per day, and another 300 milligrams 3 times per day. The cimetidine is included in this protocol because it has been clinically shown to improve the survivability of gastrointestinal cancer patients, and it is believed to do so by decreasing the growth rate of cancer cells and helping the immune system's lymphocytes to infiltrate them. The AHCC is added to boost the immune system, but also downregulate proteins and thus inhibit malignant progression. It also has cytotoxic effects on certain cancer cells and can also make them more vulnerable to chemotherapy. The herb curcumin is added because it has been shown to suppress metastases and cellular transformations. And finally, the anoro is used because it induces senescence in tumor cells, which means that it makes them think they are old and that they should stop dividing. One possible downside with Kevin's protocol is that it only includes one antiparasitic, and there are some cancers that doesn't respond to Fenbendazole. One example of this is a person who is a frequent poster on Kevin's Facebook group. Her cancer did not respond to only Fenbendazole, so she added the antiparasitic Ivermectin and the antiparasitic herb called wormwood, and also a bunch of other supplements. By doing so, she managed to get to the state of no evidence of disease with her bladder cancer. This is a more advanced cocktail that Randy on the same Facebook group came up with to fight pancreatic cancer, where he added multiple antiparasitics to target different pathways of the tumor. He says that it helped the person close to him get to the state of no evidence of disease in their body. These cocktails are highly experimental, and what is included depends on what type of cancer a person has. For instance, it was found that Mebendazole was effective against 80% of colorectal cancer cell lines, but only 25% of lung and 28% of renal cancer cell lines tested in this study. So if a person happens to have a tumor consisting of cells that Mebendazole doesn't respond to, it might be a good idea to switch to some other antiparasitic. Some people also choose to take their Fenbendazole with food because it was shown in dogs to increase its bioavailability. Also, people have to consider that the antiparasitic metronidazole and Mebendazole should not be taken simultaneously because it increases the risk of developing Stevens-Johnson syndrome. Another consideration people are forced to follow is what type of drugs are available without prescription in the country they live in. People also mix conventional cancer treatments such as surgery, radiation, antibodies and chemotherapy with the antiparasitic protocols. The general idea is to attack the cancer in as many different ways as possible while minimizing the damage done to the rest of the body. This makes it very difficult to pinpoint what the actual effects of the antiparasitics are. A survey was conducted on Korean cancer patients who had used antiparasitics in combination with conventional treatments during their fight with various types of cancers. Out of 86 people who answered the survey, 52.3% said that the use of antiparasitics improved their physical condition. 34.9% believed that it helped them shrink their tumors, and 3.5% said that it decreased the number of tumor masses. Combined, this is a 79.1% positive perception towards the effectiveness. 73.3% said that they did not experience any adverse effects, and only 3.5% experienced liver abnormalities, and 3.5% reported hematological effects. Another observation was conducted by scientists from the Stevenson Cancer Center at the University of Oklahoma, where they monitored success stories posted on Facebook and Joe Tippens' homepage during 2019. They found 173 cases where 38% of these reported that using benzimidazoles got them to the state of no evidence of disease in their bodies. 50% reported that these antiparasitics shrunk their tumors, 7% reported that it kept their cancer stable, 3% said that it improved their health, and 2% were reported to have died despite using antiparasitics. So there is a vast amount of scientific evidence that antiparasitics fight cancer, and many people who tried it report that these drugs have saved their life. The question everyone now is asking themselves is, why isn't this mainstream medical practice? Especially since the side effects of concern for antiparasitics is generally limited to liver toxicity, which only occurs in a small number of patients. To answer this question, I will cite the authors of this paper who did a review of the published literature of the antiparasitic pyrivinum pamoate. With such clear evidence for the efficacy of pyrivinum pamoate, the logistic and economic obstacles to using this agent in the clinic are unfortunate. Both pyrivinum pamoate and pyrivinum chloride have been used in hundreds of thousands of human patients and have been found to be incredible safe agents. Pyrivinum pamoate has been shown to be effective in multiple cancer types in vivo in many publications, demonstrating clear potential for efficacy in humans. There is a lack of clinical interest in pyrivinum pamoate, which appears to be due to the poor patentability prospects. Phase 1, 2 and 3 clinical trials cost $4, $13 and $20 million respectively, due to the wealth of previously published literature regarding pyrivinum pamoate as an anti-cancer agent as detailed in this review. Creating an enforceable patent strategy for pyrivinum pamoate would be challenging. Without a patent, it would be difficult for any organization running a clinical trial to recoup their investments. So the authors argue that it is because it costs $37 million to prove that a drug is safe and effective. You need a patent in order to earn this money back. But because there are so many scientific studies showing that antiparasitics work against cancer, it makes it almost impossible to get the patent approved. This is because the law says that in order for your patent to be valid, there cannot be any prior information showing that antiparasitics have an effect against cancer, and a scientific paper showing that it works is regarded as such information. Because the doctors in the West are forced to practice evidence-based medicine, which only encompasses drugs that have passed these expensive clinical trials, they cannot prescribe you antiparasitics to treat your cancer. And this is why people eat horse paste and dog dewormer to save their lives. Not because they are crazy, and not because they are wrong, but because this bureaucratic system we're living in is completely broken. There is also a possibility that the medical industrial complex is afraid of competition. Back in 2016, the average cost of a 6-month course of chemotherapy was $27,000. Thus, it is in their best interest to keep the cheap alternative treatments hidden and scare people away from using them by manipulating the news media and Google search results. Take for instance if you Google Joe Tippens. The first result shown is a paper called "How Cancer Patients Get Fake Cancer Information from TV to YouTube, a qualitative study focusing on Fenbendazole scandal." This is a totally flawed paper where the whole premise is an assumption that the reason Joe Tippens beat cancer was due to the clinical trial for Keytruda he was also enrolled in, and had absolutely nothing to do with the Fenbendazole he was taking. But Joe Tippens had widely metastasized small cell lung cancer, which Keytruda was shown not to be effective against, and was withdrawn for the use against it in March of 2021. This piece of shit paper was published in October 2022, so they had plenty of time to correct this mistake. They also do not mention that he had the best response of any participants in the clinical trial, and that the doctors were baffled as to why he was such a statistical outlier given his initially poor prognosis. The paper also doesn't mention the vast amount of scientific literature showing anti-cancer effects of antiparasitics. The authors just assumes Fenbendazole doesn't work, calls it a scandal, and then interviews some cancer patients about where they first heard about it. This paper shouldn't even have passed peer review, but instead it is boosted as the first search result on Google. We all remember big techs and the media's narrative regarding certain injections and how they try to control the narrative about that particular disease. Would it be such a far stretch to assume that they could be doing the same thing with cancer? YouTube has also scrubbed all videos of Joe Tippens telling his story, so that it's very likely that they will try to suppress this information, which makes it very important to share it with others while we still can. Who knows, maybe together us rogue scientists can figure out the best combination of repurposed drugs, herbs and supplements in order to once and for all cure cancer.
Coming of the Lord, he's trampling out the vintage where the grapes are at the store. He'th loosed the fateful lightning of his terrible swift sword. His truth is marching on. I've seen in the watchfires of 100 serpent camps. They have builded him an altar in the evening dews and damps. I can read his righteous sentence by the dim and flaring lamps. His day is marching on. With a glory in his bosom that transfigures human. As he died to make men holy, let us die to make men free, while God is marching on. He's coming.